Well, good afternoon, everyone. As all of you know, we've spent a lot of time talking about spending and debt here in the Senate this year, but we all know, both Democrats and Republicans, that the number one issue on the minds of the American people is jobs. And the easiest way and the quickest way to create new jobs for Americans here in America would be to finally ratify the 3 trade agreements negotiated by the previous administration that have been sitting there dormant for the entire Obama administration. The president, to his credit, says he's in favor of doing all 3 agreements. What we have been perplexed by is the lack of willingness to initiate the process. Only Korea appears to be imminent. We believe that Korea, Panama, and Colombia all should be sent up forthwith, as rapidly as possible. There was an interesting article, I believe, just a week ago, I think in the New York Times, about how the Colombians are simply recalibrating, given the fact that we've moved away from them, establishing a relationship with Hugo Chavez, upping their contacts with Chinese businessmen. In other words, moving on without us. And Colombia, of course, has been our strongest ally, arguably, in South America. So Senator Portman suggested to Senator Hatch and myself that there might be a way to provide the president some additional incentive. And so I'm here today to announce that we have got 44 signatures on a letter to the president indicating that we don't intend to move forward on the nomination of a new Secretary of Commerce or any other trade-related position that requires confirmation of the Senate until all 3 trade agreements are sent to the Senate and the House for consideration. So this particular letter will go out today. And with that, let me call on our ranking member of the Finance Committee, Senator Hatch, the Committee of Jurisdiction, and then we'll go to Senator Portman, whose idea this was, and I thought was the best idea we've heard so far, to give the president the kind of incentive he needs to do what he says he's in favor of. Orrin?
Well, thank you, Mr. Leader, and we're very grateful to have Rob Portman with us, who has had an extensive experience in this area. Now, the White House has spent 2 years talking about the importance of exports and trade. As far as I'm concerned, talk is cheap, and this administration has not followed up with any real action on much of what needs to be done here. The result, we're falling behind our trading partners, and while we wait, other countries are writing the trade rules. While we hesitate, other countries are opening up markets for their workers and their job creators. And these 2 clear examples are our trade agreements with Colombia and Panama that were signed years ago. The president says he wants to get them done, but we've heard that over and over. After 2 years in office, we still don't know whether the president will ever submit the Colombia and Panama free trade agreements to Congress for a vote. In fact, Finance Committee Chairman Baucus and I sent a letter to U.S. Trade Representative Ron Kirk asking him to explain what changes the administration needed to these 2 agreements. We asked him to provide answers for us at a hearing we held last week. The response? Well, we didn't get one, neither before the hearing or during the hearing. My fear is that in trying to appease its union allies, the administration is willing to let these 2 agreements wither on the vine. Now, that would be profoundly disappointing. It would be, and it would ultimately amount to a blow to our economy, our entire economy. We are here today to make clear that we will not allow that to happen. As I told Ambassador Kirk last week, I will do everything I can to move these job-creating agreements forward. That's also the position of 44 Republican senators who signed the letter to the president. Now, our message is clear. Unless the president acts on these agreements, we will withhold support for any nominee for Commerce Secretary or any other trade-related nominees. We can't afford to let the president's failure to act on these agreements continue to diminish our standing in the world or further harm our businesses and our workers. Last week, I invited the administration to start working with us to draft implementing bills for these 2 agreements, just as we are working on them with regard to Korea. If they are serious about getting this done, I just hope they'll accept my offer. The fact is, there's at least $11 billion in trade with Korea, probably $3 billion or more with Colombia that is gradually going to other countries, and up to $1 billion in Panama. Panama, a country with which we've had such a trade relationship and overall relationship over all these years. It's just a doggone crying shame that they can't seem to get it together and do what has to be done to bring these three agreements to a vote.
Thanks, Orrin.
Thanks, Orrin. Thank you all. Senators Hatch and McConnell have said it well. This is about jobs, and we're trying to help the president to do what he has talked about of doubling exports over the next 5 years. We can only do it by opening more markets to U.S. workers and farmers and service providers. And these three agreements are a great way to do it. Combined, these agreements will create 250,000 jobs. That's using the president's own metrics. The Chamber of Commerce has recently come out with an analysis showing that if we don't move forward with these three agreements, we'll continue to lose more market share, and we will risk losing 380,000 more jobs in this country. So we have a chance to create 250,000 jobs or lose 380,000 jobs. This seems to me to be a great opportunity for us as Republicans and Democrats alike to move forward on something that will help get this economy moving again and deal with the unacceptably high unemployment numbers in states like Ohio and around the country. Senator Hatch talked a little about market share being lost. Let me give you one example that I thought was striking. In the last 3 or 4 years, our share of agricultural exports to Colombia, one of the countries that we're talking about here, has diminished substantially as Colombia has completed agreements with other countries. So with regard to corn and wheat and soybeans, we've gone from a 71% U.S. market share of exports of agricultural products to a 27% market share. And when you talk to farm state legislators here in the Senate and in the House, they're hearing, as I am, from our farmers about losing that market share. But the same is true with manufactured products. The same is true with our services. These are three markets that represent over 1 million consumers. These markets are extremely important to, 100 million consumers, 100 million consumers. These markets are extremely important to our competitiveness. On July 1st, we would expect that there will be 2 agreements signed and ratified with Korea and Colombia, but that will be with the European Union and Korea and Canada with Colombia. And as those agreements go into effect, again, market share will be taken from U.S. workers, U.S. farmers, and U.S. service providers. So this is an opportunity for us to create jobs and to help the president achieve his objective, which we all share, of doubling exports over the next 5 years.
Any questions, everyone?
Yes. Mr. Minority Leader, a lot of these trade nominees have been blocked already, and I'm wondering if this new move doesn't work, are you prepared, if it comes down to it, to vote against the Korea FTA or whip against it if the president doesn't heed your call and he does send to Congress the Korea agreement without Panama and Colombia?
You're looking down and reading your question. I didn't get it. If we're prepared to do what?
Vote against the Korea FTA?
No, I'm not going to vote against an agreement I'm in favor of.
What about whipping it?
What we're talking about here is giving the president the incentive to go on and do what he said he's in favor of doing, which is all 3 agreements. And I think it's a perfectly reasonable way to incentivize him to do what he says he's already in favor of, and maybe even a pretty good excuse to his union allies for going forward with all 3 agreements, something that we should have done, frankly, years ago.
Leader McConnell?
Yeah.
If I can ask about the CR for just a moment here.
Mhm.
There are a number of House Republicans, particularly conservatives and freshmen over there, who are said they're not going to vote for the CR that's being put forth this week in the House. Do you feel similar pressures from folks in your caucus over here? Marco Rubio, for instance, has said that he's concerned about voting for another CR. What about those, with relations to the Tea Party on this side? Is that going to be a problem on this side?
Well, there are a complex set of issues, including the absence of riders. If you put riders on, you have a different set of problems. I think we can stipulate that this is not going to be easy. Different members have different goals. I think it's a good idea to pass the three-week CR. It continues to keep us on a glide path to reducing spending, and it actually keeps us on that path at the same level it would take to achieve the $61 billion reductions that the House voted for. And I thought it was noteworthy last week that while neither of the in-game CR solutions that were voted on the Senate passed, the House Republican package actually did better in the Democratic Senate than the Democratic Senate package. So this will be an interesting challenge as we go forward. I think it will pass. It will get us an additional 3 weeks. Then Speaker Boehner, Majority Leader, and the President are going to have to re-engage and try to get an ultimate solution for this year's spending.
Would this be, if I can follow up, would this be the final CR that you could abide on this side?
I'm not going to project the way forward here. We're trying to achieve spending reductions, and no one can actually remember when that last happened. And there are differences of opinion about how much to cut. I mean, I have members who think we're not cutting nearly enough. I've got members who think we're cutting too little. I've got some members who would like to have riders, some members who would not like to have riders. All of this is a good argument for passing appropriation bills one at a time, which did not happen last year, and I hope will happen this year. I've had a number of conversations with my counterpart, Senator Reid, about actually doing the basic work of government this year. That is actually passing each individual appropriation bill. I hope we'll do that. Yeah.
Senator, just to clarify on the free trade agreements, did you say that you would hold up a vote on the Commerce Secretary until all 3 agreements
Correct.
are sent up here?
Correct. Or any other trade-related position that requires confirmation.
Senator McConnell, on the nuclear crisis in Japan, I know you don't want to discuss what U.S. policy should be right now, but in light of the situation there, do you think it's a setback politically for the efforts of supporters of nuclear power to move that forward, and what can be done to overcome that if you think it does exist?
Well, I think it's safe to say every time we have a catastrophic event, like the BP oil spill last summer, like the shooting in Arizona in January, it not surprisingly kicks off an American domestic discussion about our own policies and whether or not they should be looked at. With regard to the event in Japan on Friday, I simply said, and it remains my view, that we ought not to make a long-term decision about any American energy policy in the wake of an environmental catastrophe in another part of the world. In other words, we ought to try to right now focus on helping the Japanese in any way that we possibly can, and I'm confident the administration's doing that, and put on the back burner for the moment kind of long-term policy debates about the way forward here.
Senator McConnell, on the issue of helping the Japanese, in the CR that passed the House, the $61 billion cut that Republicans passed, there were some fairly deep cuts to international disaster assistance, USAID at $121 million. On helping Japan, do you have any concerns that with cuts that deep, since you favor them, that during the next major crisis, our ability to help in the acute sense would be hampered? Yeah,
well, at the risk of being redundant, we're going to pass the short-term CR this week. The discussions are already underway between the Speaker, the Majority Leader, and the administration over how to resolve spending for the balance, excuse me, for the balance of the year. And all of those issues, including the ones you just raised, will be considered in the context of that.
Senator McConnell, would this plan to hold up the nominations be in addition to plans to hold up the vote on South Korea, or is it a substitute for that strategy?
I think the letter's quite clear. It would be the Secretary of Commerce and any trade-related position.
So that also includes the Korea Free Trade Agreement?
Includes what?
The Korea Free Trade Agreement. There was discussion at the Finance Committee hearing last week that there was an effort to hold up the passage of that agreement until the other 2 months.
I thought I addressed that. I'm not in favor of voting against or holding up something I'm already in favor of. I expect that's your view, Senator. You can speak for yourself. But what we are saying is, Mr. President, go on and do what you say you're for. Get it on up here, get all 3 of them up here, and you won't have any trouble confirming people who are going to be put up for Secretary of Commerce, which we know is open, or any trade-related position that may come open that requires Senate ratification.
Just for a second.
Yeah, let me.
Just quickly on the Finance Committee hearing last week, what you saw there was a bipartisan push to have the president send up all 3 agreements. So it wasn't so much holding up one agreement for another. It was this frustration that is felt on both sides of the aisle with the lack of progress on opportunities to create jobs here in America. And so you heard that at the Finance Committee hearing. You saw it in the letter that Senator Hatch talked about that was sent to the administration. Recall that the Colombian Free Trade Agreement was completed almost 5 years ago. And it's been already renegotiated once, some would say twice, depending on how you describe renegotiation. It's time to move forward. And it's time to move forward for all the reasons we've stated today that relate to jobs and exports, but also because all 3 of these countries are allies and partners of ours in critical parts of the world. And Senator McConnell talked a little about the importance in Latin America of having a strong ally who is supported by us and sticks with us. That's certainly true with Panama and Colombia. And with regard to Korea, it's incredibly important to have an American footprint in that part of the world on trade. When we started the negotiations on the Korea trade opening agreement, so-called Chorus agreement, the United States was the largest trading partner with Korea. Today, China is the largest trading partner with Korea. And we're losing market share every day we don't complete our agreement. As I noted earlier, in July, it's expected that the countries of the European Union are going to complete and implement their trade opening agreement with Korea, making matters even worse. So it's time to move forward on all 3 of these agreements.
Senator Portman, is there any assurance that the administration could give you short of actually sending them through? Chairman Walker said last week that either send them up together or give us some assurance that they're so closely linked that they will all 3 go up closely in time. Is there any assurance that would resolve this situation and get the job done?
Mitch, do you want to address that? Yeah.
Well, I mean, we'll have to hear from them. We're not. We're anxious to help the president do what he says he's in favor of doing. And as Rob has pointed out, and by the way, we're fortunate to have a genuine trade expert in our conference now with Senator Portman. This is not just a Republican concern. The chairman of the Finance Committee has a similar view. So it's time to get moving here. These agreements have been languishing long enough. Any other questions for Senator Portman?
Well, for both of you, since this is Senator Portman's idea apparently, how much leverage does this actually give you with the administration, given that he hasn't sent up the nominee yet for Commerce, and he theoretically could go weeks or longer without Commerce Secretary?
I guess we'll find out.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, this this idea is born out of frustration. We've tried everything else, including logic and facts, and presenting in a very clear, again, bipartisan way why it's important to move forward with these trade opening agreements to create jobs. And my sense is that with regard to Korea, the president has made a decision, although frankly it still hasn't arrived. And with regard to the other 2 agreements, as Senator Hatch said, there seems to be more politics involved, and we need to get beyond the politics and move forward with everything we can possibly do to create jobs and opportunity right now. This will help with regard to putting people back to work in places like Ohio, where we have a 9.6% unemployment rate, but it also helps to deal with our fiscal crisis, because we've got to get the economy moving. We've got to grow this economy in order to deal with the budget dilemma we face, as well as make these reductions in spending we've talked about. So this is a logical step forward, and we would not be turning to this if we weren't getting the response that you would expect from the administration, an administration that says that they agree with us that we need to increase exports. In fact, has a goal to double exports in the next 5 years.
Okay, thanks everybody.